The Sentinel had stood silent for 17 million years, and Dr. Zara Kincaid walked past it without breaking stride. That single, unremarkable moment triggered alarms across 43 star systems and caused the Galactic Archives to execute an emergency reclassification protocol that had not been activated since the Predecessor War ended 3 epochs ago. Zara had no idea. She was too focused on her mapping equipment, cataloging yet another section of the Vara ruins on the remote moon of Epsilon Grave. The archaeological site was massive, covering an area the size of a small continent, and she had been surveying it alone for 3 months. Solitary work suited her. No one to explain herself to, no one to slow down her process, no one to tell her she was too obsessive about details nobody else cared about. The Sentinel was just another structure in a forest of ancient architecture. Black stone, roughly cylindrical, maybe 4 meters tall. Unremarkable compared to the towers and archways surrounding it. Her scanner flagged it as inactive, same as everything else in the ruins. Dead technology from a dead civilization. Standard archaeological work. She walked past, her attention on her data pad, and continued mapping. 300 light-years away, in the primary data nexus of the Galactic Coordination Network, an AI that had been dormant since the dawn of recorded history suddenly activated. The Watcher, oldest of the Sentinel systems, began analyzing information that should not exist. Cross-referencing, verifying, recalculating assumptions held for millions of years. Then it sent a single encrypted message to the Council of Recognized Civilizations. Primitive species designation requires immediate revision. Humanity reclassification to successor status pending verification. Zara spent another hour mapping before the communication array in her camp started receiving priority messages. 17 of them, all flagged as urgent, all from species she barely knew existed. "What in the world?" she muttered, pulling up the first message. It was from the Korvax Directorate, one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations. They wanted to send a delegation to Epsilon Grave immediately, to meet with her specifically. The second message was from the Thel Consortium. Same request, same urgency. By the fifth message, from a species called the VRYNN that Zara had never even heard of, she started to feel genuine concern. Something was very wrong. The sixth message was different. It came from the Galactic Coordination Network itself, bearing credentials that her system flagged as impossible to forge. The text was brief and deeply unsettling. Dr. Zara Kincaid, you have been identified as having passed the Sentinel on Epsilon Grave at coordinates 47.2193 minus 89.4456 at 1437 Standard Time. This interaction has triggered ancient protocols. Please remain at your location. A representative will arrive within 1 standard day to explain. Do not approach the Sentinel again until briefed. This is not a request. I passed what? Zara said aloud, pulling up her survey logs. She backtracked her route from the afternoon, overlaying it on the site map. There, a black cylindrical structure at exactly those coordinates. She had walked within 2 meters of it. So what? She had walked past hundreds of structures. Why did this one matter? The answer came sooner than promised. 6 hours later, a ship that made her research vessel look like a child's toy descended from orbit. Sleek, massive, and broadcasting credentials from the council itself. From it emerged a being Zara recognized from Xenology texts as Archon Velis, one of the 5 permanent council members. An Archon, coming to see her. Personally. Dr. Kincaid, Velis said, their crystalline form refracting the moon's dim light into rainbows. We need to discuss what you did to the Sentinel. I did nothing to it, Zara protested. I walked past a stone cylinder. I did not touch it, did not interact with it, did not even know it was significant. That is precisely the problem, Velis replied. Or rather, the revelation. Dr. Kincaid, do you understand what the Sentinels are? Ancient monitoring systems? Early warning networks? Honestly, I assumed they were inactive. My scans showed no power signatures. They are active. They have been active for 17 million years. They simply do not respond to most species. Velis gestured for her to follow, moving toward the Sentinel Zara had unknowingly passed. The Sentinels were created by the Predecessors during their final war. They serve as guardians, as tests, as barriers. They identify beings with specific qualities and respond accordingly. What qualities? The Predecessors called it the resonance. A particular pattern of consciousness, of neural architecture, of something we still do not fully understand. It exists in very few species. When the Sentinels detect it, they activate. Velas stopped before the black cylinder. You walked past this Sentinel, Dr. Kincaid. It detected you, and it did something it has not done for 3 million years. It opened. Zara stared at the cylinder. It looked exactly as it had earlier. Solid black stone, unmarked, seemingly inactive. I do not see anything open. Because you are not using the right senses. Velas manipulated a device. The air around the Sentinel shimmered, revealing layers of reality Zara's eyes could not normally perceive. The cylinder was open, its interior filled with spiraling geometries and flowing data that existed in dimensions her mind struggled to process. What is it doing? She asked. Scanning, recording, transmitting. When you passed, it analyzed you completely. Your biology, your neurology, your consciousness itself. Then it compared that data against the predecessor archives and confirmed something the Council has suspected but never proven. Velas turned their crystalline eyes toward Zara. Humanity carries the resonance. You are successors. The word hung in the air like a verdict. I do not understand what that means, Zara said slowly. It means humanity is not a primitive species that recently achieved spaceflight. It means you are the inheritors of the predecessors. Not genetically, but neurologically, psychologically, perhaps spiritually if such things exist. The Sentinels were designed to identify species capable of understanding and wielding predecessor technology. For 17 million years, only 3 species have triggered a Sentinel response. Now there are 4. Velas paused. This changes everything. How? Why does it matter if we have some pattern the predecessors recognized? Because the predecessors left weapons, Dr. Kincaid. Knowledge. Power that could reshape galaxies. All locked behind Sentinel barriers that only resonance-bearing species can pass. The Council has built galactic stability on the assumption that no new successor species would emerge. Your kind has just invalidated that assumption. Zara felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders. You are saying humanity just became dangerous. I am saying humanity just became significant. There is a difference, though sometimes the distinction is academic. Velas gestured back toward their ship. The Council is convening an emergency session. You will need to testify about your experience. But first, you need to understand what you can do now that the Sentinel has recognized you. What I can do? Touch it. The Sentinel. Use your hand. It will respond to you now. Zara approached the cylinder slowly. Up close, she could see faint patterns in the black stone, symbols that had not been visible before. They seemed to pulse gently, waiting. She extended her hand. Her fingers made contact with the surface. The universe exploded into meaning. Data flooded into her mind. Not words or images, but pure understanding. The history of the predecessors. Their rise, their civilization spanning thousands of worlds. Their achievements in technology that made modern science look like children playing with sticks. Their war against something from outside known space, something that had nearly destroyed everything. And their final act, creating the Sentinels. Locking away their most dangerous knowledge behind barriers only specific consciousness types could pass. Ensuring that whatever species emerged in the aftermath would have the mental architecture to use their legacy responsibly. Zara gasped and pulled her hand away. The visions faded, but the understanding remained. What did you see? Velas asked. Everything. They left it all behind. Technology that could terraform worlds in days. Weapons that could tear holes in space. Knowledge of dimensions beyond the 4 we know. They sealed it all away, waiting for species that could think like them to emerge. Zara looked at her hand, still tingling from the contact. Why us? What makes human consciousness compatible with theirs? That is what we need to determine. But preliminary analysis suggests it relates to human emotional complexity and pattern recognition. The way you process information through both logic and intuition simultaneously. The predecessors were similar in cognitive architecture. Velas activated a holographic display showing comparative brain scans. See here? Human neural pathways mirror predecessor patterns in key areas related to abstract reasoning and creative problem solving. It is not exact, but close enough for the Sentinels to recognize. So what happens now? The Council just accepts that humanity can access predecessor sites. The Council is debating that as we speak. Some members argue humanity should be immediately elevated to full recognition and granted access to known Sentinel locations. Others argue you are too young a species, too unpredictable, too likely to misuse what you find. Velus's form shifted colors, displaying discomfort. There is also the matter of existing treaties. The Korvax Directorate has spent millennia excavating predecessor sites. They will not appreciate competition from newcomers. This is not about competition. This is about understanding our past. For you, perhaps. For some of your kind, it will absolutely be about power. Do not pretend otherwise, Dr. Kincaid. Every species has those who would weaponize any advantage. Velus turned away. But that is politics. Right now, we have a more immediate concern. The Sentinel that recognized you also transmitted your genetic and neural patterns to every other Sentinel in the network. All 17,000 of them across 43 systems. They are all active now, waiting for humans to approach. 17,000. The predecessors were thorough. They placed Sentinels at every site of significance, every cache of knowledge, every sealed facility. Most we know about. Some we only suspect exist. And now all of them will respond to human touch. Velus pulled up a star map covered in glowing points. Treasure hunters are already mobilizing. Research teams are demanding priority access. Military forces are arguing for strategic control. You have started something that will reshape the galactic political landscape. Zara stared at the map, at the thousands of sites suddenly accessible to her species. I just wanted to map some ruins. And instead you open the galaxy. Welcome to significance, Dr. Kincaid. It is rarely comfortable. The council session was a nightmare of bureaucracy and competing interests. Zara testified via hologram, explaining what she had experienced when touching the Sentinel. The council members listened with expressions ranging from fascination to concern to outright hostility. The Korvax representative was particularly aggressive. You cannot grant humans unrestricted access to predecessor technology. They barely understand basic stellar engineering. Give them weapons capable of shattering planets, and disaster will follow. We are not children, Zara countered. Humanity has achieved spaceflight, established colonies, joined the galactic community peacefully. We deserve the same opportunities as any other species. You deserve what you can safely handle. The predecessors did not leave their legacy for primitives to stumble across. The predecessors left their legacy for species with the resonance. Humanity has it. That is not opinion. That is documented fact confirmed by your own monitoring systems. The debate raged for hours. Eventually, the council reached a compromise that satisfied no one. Humanity would be reclassified from primitive to emerging successor, a new category created specifically for them. This granted limited access to Sentinel sites under council supervision. Human researchers could work at predecessor locations, but only with oversight from recognized species. Any significant discoveries required approval before implementation. It is not ideal, Zara told Velus after the session concluded. But it is progress. 6 months ago, my species was barely noticed by the council. Now we have a seat at the table, even if it is a small one. You underestimate what you have achieved, Velus replied. Every species in the council was once where humanity is now, struggling for recognition, proving themselves worthy of attention. Most took centuries to gain emerging status. Humanity did it with one woman walking past a rock. I did nothing special. I just existed in a way the Sentinel recognized. That is precisely what makes it significant. You did not manipulate the system or force recognition. You simply were yourself, and that was enough. It suggests humanity has intrinsic value the Council cannot ignore, regardless of your technological level. Over the following months, human researchers flooded into Sentinel sites across the galaxy. Most could not directly access the sealed knowledge, but they could work the outer structures, catalog the architecture, map the extensive network of predecessor installations. Zara remained at Epsilon Grave, continuing her original survey work while also studying the Sentinel that had started everything. It responded to her touch now, providing glimpses of information when she made contact. Never overwhelming, always measured, as if it understood her limitations and adjusted accordingly. "You are teaching me," she said during one session, her hand pressed against the black surface. Slowly, carefully, like I am a student and you are a patient teacher. The Sentinel pulsed with confirmation. Not words, but understanding transmitted directly into her consciousness. Yes, that was its purpose, to identify those capable of learning and guide them gradually toward comprehension. Why? The predecessors were gone for millions of years when you were created. Why care about species that would emerge long after they died? Another pulse of meaning. Legacy. Purpose. The desire to matter beyond death. The predecessors had faced their end and chosen to ensure their knowledge survived them. They had created the Sentinels not as guardians of treasure, but as teachers waiting for students capable of learning. We are those students. Not just humanity, any species with the resonance. But humanity was the fourth to emerge, and that was significant. For species across millions of years, it suggested the predecessors had been rare in their cognitive patterns, and those who matched them would be equally rare. So there might not be more? No fifth or sixth successor species. The Sentinel could not predict the future, but probability suggested few, if any, additional species would emerge with the necessary neural architecture. The four existing successors might be all that would ever exist. That makes us valuable and vulnerable. Other species will see us as competition or threats. The Sentinel pulsed agreement. Then it showed her something new. A vision of the predecessors in their final days, making the choice to preserve their knowledge rather than take it into oblivion with them. They had understood that future species might misuse what they left behind. But they had also understood that hoarding knowledge was a greater evil than the risk of its misuse. They trusted us. All of us, not just successors. They left their legacy accessible to any species that developed the capacity to understand it, even knowing some might weaponize it. Yes, that was faith in the future. The belief that intelligence would eventually outweigh aggression, that wisdom would emerge from chaos given enough time and opportunity. I hope they were right, Zara said quietly. I hope we prove worthy of that trust. The years that followed tested that hope constantly. Human teams working at Sentinel sites made discoveries that revolutionized multiple fields. Medical advances that extended lifespans. Energy systems that made fusion power look primitive. Agricultural techniques that could feed billions with minimal resources. But there were also conflicts. Corporations fought for control of sites. Nations argued over who should have access to what discoveries. And other species watched nervously as humanity rapidly closed the technological gap that had kept them categorized as primitive. You are becoming dangerous, the Korvax ambassador told Zara during a diplomatic meeting. Not because you are aggressive, but because you are advancing too quickly. Stability requires predictable development. Your kind is anything but predictable. We are learning, same as any species would given the same opportunities. No, you are learning faster than any species we have documented. Human researchers are solving predecessor puzzles that have stumped our best minds for millennia. You are not just accessing the legacy, you are understanding it in ways we cannot. The ambassador's tone carried something that might have been fear. That is what makes you dangerous. Not military power or territorial ambition. Understanding. Zara considered that carefully. You are saying the Council is afraid of humanity becoming too knowledgeable too quickly? I am saying some on the Council question whether we were right to grant you any access at all. They argue we should have quarantined your kind, kept you isolated until you developed naturally without predecessor assistance. But you cannot. The Sentinels already recognized us. That knowledge cannot be undone. No, the ambassador agreed. Which is why we must adapt. The question is whether humanity will prove themselves worthy of the predecessor's trust or whether they will validate our fears. That question haunted Zara as her research continued. Every discovery came with responsibility. Every advance carried risk. The predecessors had left tools that could build or destroy, and humanity now had access to both. A breakthrough came 5 years after her initial contact with the Sentinel. Zara and her expanded team discovered a sealed chamber in the deepest level of the Epsilon Grave ruins. The entrance bore Sentinel markings, responding only to human touch. Inside, they found something that changed everything again. A message, not recorded data, but a living transmission, preserved across millions of years in stasis that even the predecessors' advanced technology could barely sustain. The being that appeared was predecessor, unmistakably. Tall, elegant, with features that suggested both familiarity and alienness. If you are seeing this, the being said in a language the Sentinels translated perfectly, Then our gamble succeeded. Successor species have emerged. You have the resonance. You can understand what we left behind. But understanding is not enough. You must also choose wisely how to use it. The message continued, outlining what the predecessors had sealed away and why. Not just weapons, but knowledge of existential threats. Dimensions that should not be accessed. Technologies that could unravel reality itself if mishandled. They had left this information accessible, but behind layers of warnings and tests specifically because they wanted successors to comprehend the danger before gaining the power. We nearly destroyed everything, the predecessor admitted. Our war against the outsiders almost collapsed the dimensional stability of local space. We won, but barely. We survived, but at catastrophic cost. And we learned that power without wisdom is suicide. If you can see this message, you have passed the first tests. You can access our legacy. But please, I beg you across the gulf of millions of years, use what you find carefully. Build more than you destroy. Create more than you take. Be better than we were. The message ended. Zara stood in silence, tears streaming down her face. They were not gods, she said quietly. They were people like us. Brilliant, powerful, but still capable of terrible mistakes. And they died knowing they had nearly destroyed everything. They left us their warning, her assistant said. They wanted us to learn from their errors. More than that, they wanted us to have the chance they did not. To use their knowledge wisely, to achieve what they could not, to become something better than they managed to be. Zara turned to face her team. That is the real test. Not whether we can understand predecessor technology, but whether we can avoid repeating their mistakes. The message was transmitted to the council. Its impact was profound. The debates that had raged for years about human access to predecessor sites transformed. The question was no longer whether humanity should have access, but how to ensure all successor species used that access responsibly. The council established the Successor Accord, a framework governing access to predecessor technology. All 4 successor species would share knowledge and oversight. No single species could monopolize discoveries. All research would be transparent and subject to review. Any technology with existential risk would require unanimous approval before deployment. It is not perfect, Velas told Zara at the signing ceremony. But it is progress. Your kind went from ignored to indispensable in 5 years. That is extraordinary. We got lucky. I walked past a Sentinel at exactly the right time. No, you walked past a Sentinel after spending months doing careful, methodical work that no one else bothered with. You succeeded where others might have failed because you paid attention to details. That is not luck. That is character. Velas shifted colors, displaying approval. The predecessors would have appreciated you, Dr. Kincaid. You embody what they hoped for. Curiosity, caution, and the wisdom to know the difference. Zara returned to Epsilon Grave one final time before moving on to other sites. She stood before the Sentinel that had changed everything, placing her hand on its surface. Did you know? She asked. When I first walked past you, did you know how much would change? The Sentinel pulsed with gentle affirmation. Yes, it knew. Every Sentinel knew. They had been waiting for millions of years, hoping successor species would emerge, hoping the resonance would appear in new forms across new civilizations. And now the waiting was over. For successor species existed, each capable of understanding the legacy. The predecessor's final wish had been fulfilled. Knowledge would continue. Wisdom would hopefully grow. And perhaps, eventually, future species would surpass what the predecessors had achieved. No pressure then, Zara said with a tired smile. Just the weight of proving worthy of millions of years of patient waiting. The Sentinel pulsed one final time. Not pressure. Opportunity. The chance to become something extraordinary. That was the gift. What humanity did with it was up to them. Zara walked away from the Sentinel, heading back to her ship. Behind her, the ancient structure continued its vigil, no longer waiting but watching, observing what humanity would become now that they had been recognized as successors. The galaxy would never be the same. And deep in the archives of the Galactic Coordination Network, humanity's classification quietly updated from primitive species to emerging successor. One woman walking past an ancient relic had changed everything. Not through conquest or force, not through manipulation or political maneuvering, simply by existing in a way the predecessors recognized and valued. That, perhaps, was the most human thing of all. succeeding not because they tried to, but because they were authentically themselves, and that was exactly what the universe needed them to be. The Sentinels had waited millennia. Humanity had arrived, and the future opened before them, bright with possibility and weighted with responsibility. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, the predecessors' legacy lived on through those they would never meet, but had always hoped would come. If you enjoyed the story, like the video and subscribe for more. Thank you.